Good evening.
Hi.
Thank you for coming. I want to go over some housekeeping stuff real quick before we get started. Fire exits are to your left and right. One may be behind you. Check before you leave. Bathrooms are downstairs. The door should be unlocked or the key is in the door, right?
Keys are in the door.
Keys are in the door, so if you need to use the restroom, it's downstairs. The sound is not working in here. The microphones are for PEG TV. If you would like to come up and ask, or if you'd like to ask a question, we have two options. You can either come up, we ask you to try to do that. If you can't get out of your seat or you'd like somebody to bring you a microphone, just raise your hand and we'll bring you the microphone. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Mayor Mike Dunges. This evening we're going to be discussing the homeless exit coordination from the hotels, along with what the city is doing, some of the challenges that we're facing, some of the actions and steps that we've taken to this point today. But the primary reason that we're here is to hear from you about your questions, your concerns, the support you're willing to offer, and how you want to maybe possibly help, or what kind of help you may possibly need. Any questions so far? Okay, awesome. I'd like to introduce Chris and Megan. So Megan, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll go to Chris.
Hi, Megan Novak, one of the homeless response coordinators for Rutland.
And Christopher Loris II.
Awesome. So let's set the overall tone with what we're currently presented with. So the hotel voucher program through the general assistance this year, set by the legislature, had an 80-day tickers on vouchers, essentially meaning that every single household, so a household, just for those of you who don't know, can be an individual, a couple, or a family. So every single household, as of July 1, had 80 days to utilize their vouchers for an entire 12-month period. And within that 12 months, when those 80 days ran out, those vouchers were no longer available.
Either one.
As we look at that time frame, there is a caveat. There's a part of the program is something called adverse weather. Adverse weather is either after a certain date or below a certain temperature, the state will allow those vouchers to be used if you're beyond your 80 days. Right now, and over the past week and in the upcoming week, we're looking at a majority of those vouchers running out, meaning that people have utilized almost all of their 80 days, and of those 80 days, they have none left. One of the biggest challenges with this is that that voucher has been extended year after year after year for the last 5 years, right? And that is not happening this year. So the urgency, the reason we're discussing this, is because there is no voucher extension program from now until adverse weather that exists. There's been no reaction to that. What I mean by there's been no reaction to that is the state has chosen, legislature has chosen to follow what they put on the books in the law this year as of July 1. There's been a couple of different actions. I'll let Chris and Megan talk about some of the things that they've been doing, but one of the things that we've been doing in Rutland is we got together with several other municipalities. We did a press conference last week. We asked the state to step up and open up their properties and bring their services to the table. The reason that this is so important is because the state and the Agency of Human Services are the ones mandated with managing and helping the homeless in our community. That is their task. Municipalities throughout the state, not just Rutland, that have been housing through the hotel voucher program, individuals in households in this program, don't have a mandate on their books. We do not have a charter in our, we don't have regulation in our charter. We don't have ordinances, and we don't have the funding to house the unhoused. It does not exist in the municipalities. That has been, and for the last 50 years at least, a function of the state, and that is what the General Assistance Program has provided for that period of time. Some of the challenges that we face we'll go into later tonight, but I think the most important thing to communicate is that we have been talking to the state for the last 2-3 years about the need for solutions that are driven and run by the state. The state has come back to municipalities and said, what does your community need? And we have responded to the state with community needs, and one of the biggest things that we aren't seeing is a supplement to those needs. We aren't seeing a plan in place. We aren't seeing services being provided. One of the biggest challenges with that is our service providers in town would love to provide additional services. Many of them have stepped up to the plate and said, if we can find people or if we can find services, we'd be happy to apply those services in Rutland. Finding people to work in this industry right now is near impossible, and it is one of the biggest challenges that we have. Somebody asked me today, if we threw more money at it, could we solve the problem? And the answer truly is no. We have a housing shortage. We have people that need services that are being impacted by that housing shortage, and neither of those things are readily available, even if we put money on the table. What really needs to happen, and some of the things we truly need to look at, are what services can the state provide and contract out for, and where are we headed and how are we headed in that direction, and what does this community need from the state to provide those services. So I'll let Megan and Chris do a little bit of the talking, and again, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or come up to the microphone as we go. We'll open it up for questions in a little bit, and I apologize for the lack of sound system in here, so I'll ask you to use your outside voice inside tonight. So thank you very much.
So one of the main things that we've been working on and the goal that we're working towards is creating a strategic plan for Rutland for its homeless response. That plan is due in April of 2026. So we've been doing a couple of different things trying to lay the foundation for what that plan might look like. And I'm happy to talk more about it if you guys have more specific questions during the question and answer period, but I'm just going to give a real quick overview so that we can save as much time to hear from as many of you as possible. A couple of the things we've been doing is trying to look at the data on homelessness and get a better picture of Rutland-specific issues, the number of unhoused that are here in Rutland, and also the needs of those unhoused. One of the things about Vermont is that there's two continuums of care for the state, and that's a HUD term. So the HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Federal Agency, has separated Vermont into these two continuums of care, one of them being just Chittenden, and the other one being the balance of state, which is the rest of the state. And so when you're getting reports out of a lot of the mandatory reporting that comes along with that HUD funding, it's really a clouded view of what Rutland-specific numbers are and what the needs of the population who are currently in Rutland are. And so we've been trying to collect quantitative data, but we've also been talking to a lot of the providers in Rutland, trying to learn from them about what they've been experiencing, changes they've been seeing in the population, and the needs of that population. The other thing that we've been starting up now currently is getting community feedback. We do have an online form. You know, if you don't get a chance to talk tonight, or if you don't want to talk in big crowds, you can go on the city's website and access that Google form and submit feedback to us that way. But what we're really doing here tonight is trying to learn from the experiences of you all as people living in the community, working in the community, living by the community, or just visiting if you're from outside in a neighboring community, and learn from your experiences and learn about the challenges that you guys are facing, how this has impacted your day-to-day life, so that we can begin thinking about those things as we're building that strategic plan. Chris?
Yeah. Usually I would get up and give some information that we have today, but I tend to, especially with a crowd this large, take up way too much time myself. So what we will do is, from my perspective, we've given you the nickel speech, and we're just going to open up to questions, comments, and I think that will create enough conversation where you'll get all the information you need to include anything that either the mayor, Megan, or I had been quoted on in any news sources, or if anyone had watched the previous forum we had over at College of St. Joseph, you may have got some information there. But right now, just going to, I think, open it up to questions unless the mayor wants to do otherwise, and we can just go free form for the next couple hours, because when we had a lot smaller crowd than this several weeks ago, we went full 2 hours and we didn't stop talking the entire time. So it's going to be probably a good conversation. Thank you.
Just some different directions to think about questions-wise. We'll answer as much as we can, so if you have direct questions for us about what we've been doing and what we've been working on, happy to do that. What are your major concerns? That could, think about it from that standpoint. How do you think we can help as a municipality? What do you want to ask the state? What would you like to see the state do? What would you like to see the city do? And then maybe, what can you offer for help? I know I see a lot of clergy here. I know as much as they've been offering help, they're also looking for help, so I know it goes both ways. But, what can you offer for help, or what would you like to do to help in the situation? So we'll open up for questions. Again, if you have a question, please come up to the microphone and ask. If you can't get up for the microphone, I'd be happy to bring it to you if you want to raise your hand. Yeah, that'd be great.
You can just hit it, whatever you want to do.
The thing I wanted to find out, I don't know if this thing is on or not.
Yeah, it's on. There's no, just...
The thing I wanted to find out is that they mentioned the seniors were exempt from that, right? The seniors and also the ones that have kids, your single parents, or is that part of the 80 days too?
No, in previous years, the seniors and the families with children have been exempt from the 80 days, but they're not this time around. So this is everybody departing.
And the other thing is that, what about the shared housing program? They have one that's supposed to be kind of near here, whatever, in Vermont. What about, since you knew this was going to happen, what about getting something like that going? That would be for people either that have incomes or don't have income that can be doing work for the person, et cetera, and do it that way, like a barter deal. How come that hasn't been implemented in Rutland? And how come shared housing program, yeah. They have it someplace, I think it's not too far from here.
I can tell you, I haven't heard about shared housing program.
Go online, man.
We're going to write this down and look it up.
I'm thinking, where's all the homeless? I thought the homeless would be here probably at this meeting, chanting or doing whatever. You're here in the back. Hey, come on up, man. You got something to say? Come on. Here's the mic.
She did, yeah.
Hey, you wait until it's time then. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yes.
Come on up. The speakers aren't working. It's for the TV.
So if I cry, it's just me. I've experienced homelessness myself, but I'm blessed with a family that can take me in and has helped me through situations. My last situation, I owned my own house, and my son came to me and said he no longer felt safe at home because my partner at the time wasn't stable. And I gave him 30 days to leave, but I needed to leave with my son. And because he had lived there as long as he did, he was able to claim residency, and I became his landlord. And it took me 10 months to go through the court process to get him out. And I was separated half the time with my son while he went and stayed with one family member, and I stayed with another family member because there was just, room was an issue. And what I noticed through what I experienced is that Social Security, people on SSI and SSDI, I don't understand why they are not automatically put on the Section 8 program if they haven't been a felon or something that prevents them from getting on it. Why isn't that not just part of the process? Because there is absolutely nobody that gets SSI or SSDI that can afford rent for the amount that they're asking for today. And I don't understand why there are not laws preventing gouging of prices to the point where people lose their housing because they can't afford it, even though the landlord knew what they had for income. Why is that not prevented from happening? If there's nothing else that's causing an issue with them. And I also don't understand why people leaving from domestic violence only have a certain amount of time at the women's shelter locally before they lose their place to stay. And I also don't understand why there aren't possibilities for situations for people that can't afford their rent anymore because they were gouged to find somebody that could be a roommate that is currently no longer in a home that they could, some sort of a, getting people together, sharing. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that there were 88 children in our community that are houseless right now.
Well, the latest numbers from Friday was 184 children in the Rutland
Houseless?
County. What's that?
Without a house?
They were 184 kids are on the coordinated entry. They're considered homeless on the state website that they update daily. So that's one of the.
But I know personally at least 6 of those children, and I've seen all of their belongings thrown into dumpsters. They're a 6-foot teddy bear, their beds, all their clothing tossed out on the road. They were not even given 4 hours to leave their housing in their hotels that they've been in for over a year. These were children that were my friends. I lived where I was at the Travel Inn for 14 months, domestic abuse issues, and I watched these little kids grow up. I watched them learn to take their training wheels off their bicycles. I watched them learn to drill with sidewalk chalk, and to see all their beds and belongings thrown out into a dumpster last week, at the same time as every woman that has tried to step in and help their single father try to take care of those children while they're all living in hotels. And we became a community, and we stepped in and we looked out for each other. And to throw everybody out into different directions, and those little kids out on the street, and those children's belongings into the dumpster, and I've got photographs, and I could not take enough photographs to, it's just grief, it's a whole community ripped apart. So they put us in a situation where we all have to live in hotels. And I'm disabled. I have been through domestic abuse, and I have to live in a hotel. I don't have any other options because what she said, there's no rentals available. And we bonded together when we formed a community, and then they just ripped us apart and dumped us all out on the road in the last 2 weeks. And we're still trying to form a community. And we're still trying to find each other. And I had a friend that was supposed to be here tonight that her phone is off now. And I don't know if I'll ever see her again. And that's where we are in Rutland.
Thank you. I know that was tough to say in front of a crowd. And do you continue, or do you want us to give some feedback?
Just one more thing.
Yeah, please.
Is
Go ahead.
that the people that are ending up in jail because of their addiction issues, I don't understand why we don't have residential programs for people to stay long-term in to get help with their addiction issues and have a step process to being back into the community as they grow with success.
Okay. Thank you. Yep. A lot of those challenges are nationwide, and there was an article just yesterday discussing the need for a long-term substance abuse recovery facility in the state of Vermont. And there's nothing for that on the horizon, but people continue to tell stories like that hopefully will be able to be managed. But right now, as far as the housing is concerned, whether it's a hotel, whether it's an emergency shelter, whether it's transitional housing, whether it's permanent supported housing or permanent housing, there's a recognition that there's, and I'm speaking the obvious, that there's not enough units built in the state of Vermont to be occupied currently. And the challenge that the state has as they decide how to manage the funding and into what housing programs, any clog along that pipeline clogs the entire pipeline. If a person who's in transitional housing can't get permanent and they're ready to get permanent, that means there's a body that can't move into the transitional housing. And if there's an emergency shelter and somebody's ready to get into transitional housing, there may be a clog there. So it backs up the entire system, and unfortunately, the state has not had a conversation yet about prioritizing those individuals who are prioritized. Right now, there is most people between the age of 20 and 50 who do not have an eligible condition, which is for housing: pregnant, fleeing domestic violence, children, disabled, over 65, veteran, and I'm probably missing a couple, but I don't want to look it up right now. Anyone who doesn't fall into one of those categories is not even eligible for up to 80 days. They've got no eligibility at all. And for those individuals that are eligible, when we hear stories about kids getting their things thrown into the dumpster, it creates a really difficult situation for the state and the housing providers and the housing advocates to try to decide where the limited resources should go. And right now, the state has put all those priority eligible people into one bucket. So admittedly, it's first come, first serve. So there are some individuals, and I'm one of those, and I can change my mind with the right input, but right now, and the mayor also, his guidance is that the city really should be looking to take care of kids first. There are kids who are enrolled in schools, and we heard one story of a child that will be leaving the hotel and leaving the school at the same time, camping in Sudbury, Vermont, and when the voucher system opens back up in December 1st, that's when the kid will return to school. So the continuity of education is not just threatened, but it's broken. And the continued trauma that these kids are living through is not going to make their chances to be really well-meaning and productive adults, their odds are shrinking. So if you want to kick off anything more about families, go.
Yeah, no, I think, Chris said it really well the other day. Prior to 2019, the city of Rutland at any given time saw about 50 vouchers in the worst of the worst conditions in the winter. And last year we saw about 450 vouchers. That's an insurmountable task to help that many households in a community that is built to support probably that 50 from the services that we have in place. And not to say we haven't been supporting 450 the best that we can. So when we want to focus on something from a compassion standpoint, where we're going to put our efforts, it's truly got to be and you said it best, the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable. So that's really, families with children and elderly with disabilities is the major focus. And not to say that in the long run, we don't want to guide everybody through the process and help them find something, but if we're going to do something and do it urgently, that's what we're asking the state to help us with financially. So. And
between 2014 and 2019, Rutland's homeless population, according to the annual point-in-time report, once a year, all the social service agencies and housing providers under a housing urban development HUD are required to count the homeless in every community in the state of Vermont so they can access HUD funding. And for years, Rutland's numbers were 100 homeless in that annual point-in-time count, 100 individuals flatline. When COVID hit, it increased arithmetically and then exponentially, where in the latest point-in-time report from this January, 684 individuals in Rutland County are unhoused. And that is known to be an undercount. So we went from 100 to 700 in the Rutland area. Our housing providers who tried to do great things for decades were out of their depth. They only had the resources, the people, the skills, and the money to try to manage 100 homeless people. And now they've got 700. So the Rutland area did not see a commensurate increase in providers, social service providers, housing navigators, Department of Children and Family employees to help out. And that's where we're at, is still 700 homeless people in this county with resources to serve 100.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Questions? More questions? If you could come up to the mic, that would be awesome. If not, I can bring it to you.
I was going to say, I can talk loud.
Okay.
Theater geek.
I can't get it out of there.
I'm wondering, would it be possible, I know the city has housing stock, houses that have been turned over to the city or were abandoned and the city now owns. For, I hate to say short term, but for the foreseeable short term, would it be possible to get carpenters in there and make them habitable and then make them group housing for homeless? For the homeless that want to be housed, because the fact of the matter is, when it comes to homeless populations, there is a small percentage that just don't want to be inside a building. They want to be out. But for those that do want to be and need to be in houses, would that be possible?
So that's a phenomenal question. I believe that right now, the city only has 2 properties that we actually own that are not in tax sale recall space, right? So there's a year when we tax sale a property. So there are 2 properties that we own, and they are bound up in court. However, if we do have, and I'll check tomorrow, if we do have any, I think it would be fantastic. One of the things that we're looking for is volunteers to come and help. We know that there are amazing volunteers in town. Habitat for Humanity constantly has them in. They come in, they help build homes. I think that's not a bad idea at all.
You got the building at the tech center, I forget what the class is called, but the kids that, like every few years, actually build a house or rehab a house and doing smaller projects at places.
Yeah, we would need to, I've got my, some of my building inspection team in the back, and we would need to make sure that it was up to snuff, right? And livable, but if we could do that, that'd be great.
And I'm not sure, I've dealt with, worked at places, property management and hotels, where you have to deal with certificate of occupancies, but I don't know if there's like a range, like, no, it's got to be
all or
one
nothing.
level, so you need all the perks of, yeah, okay. See, that's what I wasn't sure, if you could get like bare bones about it, versus.
And there are certain things we can do. One of the things, though, even if the city doesn't have the homes, and just give me a second.
No, I'm not talking.
Okay, cool. We can do this. But one of the things we can do is, one of the things that's happened in Rutland over the last X number of years is more and more units have come offline. So there are units that are in disrepair, that have a landlord that doesn't have the funds to work on them, that has a landlord that maybe had trouble evicting somebody, for a long period of time. Those all exist, and we've been asking, and will continue to ask, those property owners to step up and let us know if they're willing to accept some assistance to bring those units online so we can get people housed. I mean, that's something we really, truly are trying to do, so.
Can I ask just one more, related but different? Okay, my understanding from a couple of articles that the Herald ran like months ago was that one of the reasons we have our homeless population boomed so much during COVID was because they were having trouble housing people that were living like up north in the Burlington, Essex area. So what they did is just, without even a care, they shipped them down here to live. And I know that in homeless shelters, that happens a lot as well. It's like your stay is over because you're expected to stay only X amount as long. And then, but there's another one, like 200 miles away, and we don't care that you don't know anyone, you gotta go. So are we able to hold the state accountable for all of the people they brought here that were not here originally, that aren't, it's like their support systems are up north.
Do you want that one, Megan?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know about holding the state accountable, but that is, one of the things that we're looking into for the strategic plan is we're identifying resources that currently exist in Rutland recognizing that the voucher system did create kind of, migration, actually, though, of people to different communities, regardless of if they had social ties down here, access to other resources down here, potential job opportunities. And so we do realize that some of the unhoused population leaving the hotels and motels may want to be getting back to other counties in the state of Vermont. And so we are exploring resources that can help people, transport not just themselves, but their belongings that they probably have down here as well, too. One of the challenges with that is, we don't have the names of people, and because they're exiting the hotels, so it's getting harder to locate people in this population. And so, if anyone knows of anyone, spread the word of people who want to get back. We do have an idea of a couple of resources that maybe those individuals could access to help them transport themselves, their belongings, back to areas where they have more resources available to them.
And so the city, we have, I'm going to say one thing, and then we'll get to the woman with the mask in the back. As far as the migration down here, this was the policy created by the state of Vermont during COVID, as it was created in a lot of other states and a lot of cities, which was to house people in hotel rooms to keep them from being congregated. Every place else in the country has wound that down. Vermont has not. And one of the dynamics we experienced in Rutland was the dynamic of hotel owners driving the housing policy for the unhoused in the state of Vermont. People found their shelter where the state gave them the shelter, and that shelter was given in hotels where the hotel owners volunteered and said, I will enter into the housing program of the state of Vermont for first $135 a night, $135 a night, and then $80 a night, and to the tune of $50 million a year. One of the challenges with doing that, while it did put a roof over people's head, that every dollar spent on the hotel program was one less dollar to spend on permanent housing.
That's right. Yep.
Likewise, again, I would say, and I'll bet anybody that I could lose the bet, that Woodstock Inn in Woodstock, Equinox in Manchester, Trapp Family Lodge in Stowe, Hotel Vermont at $500 a night down on the waterfront in Burlington did not take advantage and change their business model for the voucher program.
What about like the
Yeah. And Burlington itself has right now 0 hotels or motels that are in the housing program. Burlington proper, none. One in Colchester, one in South Burlington, Burlington 0. So as the individuals were in Chittenden County and needed a roof over their heads pursuant to the state policy, they were sent predominantly to Rutland, to Brattleboro, and to Barry. And that's what the data show. And trying to unwind that back to 100 is going to be a Herculean task. Ma'am, back, yes.
Hi, is it on? Okay. On the same realm that you were speaking to, I just see all these falling apart houses all over the state, not just in Rutland, but it's bad in Rutland. And to address the problem at a higher level, which would trickle down eventually, it seems like the state or federal monies should be available to approach these property owners and to do some type of a split with restoring these buildings, so that with the agreement that the property owner will enter into rental, whether it's HUD or otherwise rental or both, so that there's an increase of housing happening that is also assisting the homeless population at the same time, but solving the problem from a higher level down.
Thank you.
Megan may have a response to that. One that I do is, I know there have been a lot of discussions about changing the landlord-tenant laws, And woman gave a great story just earlier about how she had to leave her own house because an individual had, we'll just say the terminology, a person squatted in her house, refused to leave, so in order to extract herself from that situation, she had to leave her own house, and as she said, 10 months later. So while that kind of idea, I think is a really great idea to pursue that type of partnership, there would have to likely be some changes to the landlord-tenant laws, so those individuals that partner for that housing, if an individual is behaving in an illegal manner or not paying the rent or not taking care of the building, that there should be the capacity to have a quicker evictions than they are in Vermont right now. That's way above what Megan and I are doing, but thank you for that because that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, of course, that should be without restoration of properties too.
Yeah.
That should, those laws need to change to protect people like the woman that, have to leave their own house. And of course, there needs to be laws in place if restorations like that happen. If people don't value their house enough that they can't conduct themselves in a decent manner, maybe they don't deserve housing.
Go ahead, Megan.
One of the things that we learned that we're going to be following up on too is just, we want to investigate things that are happening in the housing market, finding those clogs, also investigating potential policies that might be having unintended consequences on the availability of affordable housing. One of the things that we heard that was a more practical issue related to what you're talking about is that there's a lack of people or contractors willing to take those contracts and do the building. Part of that being there's some law changes that maybe happened at the federal level that required purchasing American-made products to do some of these things, especially when you come into using federal funding and I'm not sure how far this goes, that's why we have a lot more to learn about that issue. But what we have heard was that even when there's contracts out there for these things, they're having a difficult time finding people to take those contracts.
I'm going to answer one more thing and then I'll come over and get you. There is a program that exists today at the state. It's called VHIP, or Vermont Housing Incentive Program, I think is what it's called. Yep. And there's two versions of it, right? VHIP 1.0, or the original version, was $30,000 per unit to take an offline unit, bring it online, and make it available directly to the unhoused first. The new version has a little bit less restrictions on who can be in it, but both of these were grant programs if you followed the rules. The challenge that we see with that, one, kind of what Chris was highlighting about landlord-tenant laws, there's only so many people willing to step up for that. Two, the applications came in fast and fierce and the money ran out in no time. And you can imagine all of Vermont applying for these different grant programs and Rutland only getting so many of them. So that was according to the governor, underfunded for the current version, and they'd like to see an expansion of that as soon as possible. I got a couple quick. Can you raise your hands if you had a question? I had one back here, and then one there, and then here. All right, great.
There's actually some flip side when you're renting to people that really can't afford it. My nephew bought a house in Rutland 3 years ago, and he says, I'm buying a house on Baxter Street. I said, good for you. But anyways, he had a tenant, Section 8, on the lower floor, and they weren't paying the rent. The state was paying $650 a month, and the state was paying $650, and the tenants had to pay $200. And he never got the rent from the tenants. He got it from the state. So my nephew calls the state. First, they had 2 kids living with him, and he told the state they're not paying the rent. And the state turned around and told him, raise the rent to $1,000 a month. And that's kind of an odd thing to do. But anyways, then the kids got taken away from the parents, and my nephew tried to evict the parents because there was needles all around the place and they were really into drugs. And so it took, I think, 2 lawyers and probably a half a year just to get rid of them. And what he's concluded is he'll never rent that apartment again because of that. So you can get somebody home, but they might want to take care of it. And I've heard about some of the hotels being filled, you know, they're not being kept up. I can't blame the hotels. These people are living in there, they're getting it for nothing. They should be keeping it clean. That's my opinion.
Thank you, but I'll disagree with you on that. The hotels have a responsibility at a bare minimum to keep the common areas, the hallways sanitary, and I can't say they, I can tell you, based on my own walkthrough on both floors of the Cortina, the property owners failed miserably in keeping those common areas sanitary and healthful.
The reason they're taking in the homeless is because they're not going to rent those hotels any other way. They're just not going to do it. We don't have enough people coming to visit this city that often. That's my opinion.
Okay. We got
Thank you.
one there up front and then the girl in the back.
I don't know if this is working. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Is there, my question, is there any question, or is there any funding still available from the ARPA funds that the city got for like the COVID relief? Can that be used to maybe like, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to think from like looking at a solution and then working backwards as like, well, we know what the problems are, right? There's a lot of them, but like for me, the short-term solution is housing these vulnerable folks and not seeing children and families and disabled people like out on the streets and camping and wherever. So I think coming up with something that should be able to be put together in a rather quick fashion should be like maybe the priority. And I'm wondering like what resources are available, and is there a space that would at least be workable over the next 6 months? And would that funding be something that could be used for that?
So you can speak to the ARPA piece, and I'll speak to the process piece. And I'm looking at somebody who was the last town service officer that the city of Rutland had. Way back in the day, 100 years ago, there was something called the overseer of the poor. And the overseer of the poor generally in every single town would take care of those who needed help in their own town. In many places, and including Rutland, they created a poor farm, which there is still a cemetery up at the transfer station for the individuals who lived at the poor farm and passed away. Poor farm was behind the McDonald's on Woodstock Avenue. 2015, because of the Agency of Human Services Welfare Department, for those who want to just speak plainly, did away, the state repealed the town service officer position statewide. It was in VSA 33, paragraph 2102, and it's gone now. So even if the community really wanted to pull itself together and do something, there is not a town service officer that has the statutory authority to create that type of program. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but that means it's a community up volunteer type system. And then the question is, where do the resources come from? There are none that municipalities are given access to take care of this problem. And you did speak to ARPA. I don't think there's any left, but that's a great question.
Yes, of the almost $5 million that we got, most of it has been allocated. I think there's $20,000 to $30,000 left, which is limited. However, of that money, $400,000 went into something called the Rental Rehab Revolving Loan Fund, which is fully available with low interest rate loans for property owners that could quickly turn a property around. So we can certainly prioritize along with VHIP, and it actually takes a very VHIP-like approach to the process of prioritizing those projects to get units back online. I think the ask is Is there funding to do something quickly? This is exactly what we've been trying to communicate to AHS and DCF. For example, the legislature put $10 million aside to go to these programs. Rutland is on the list of approved locations to build or bring something online with funding to come. But the state will not distribute those funds until we have a service provider in place to take care of the property and put those things in order, which is very appropriate, totally appropriate. To go back and, I know we just don't want to talk about challenges here. We want to take the feedback. So it's good feedback. We'll take that in. We'll continue to focus on that. But the challenge that we're faced with is Chris and Megan have been trying to find that service provider for 2 months now. And everyone they've talked to has had to turn them down, not because they want to, this is their business, this is what they do, but because they can't get the resources to bring to bear additional services to a new area or a new region. So as much as we want to put up a house, or when we get things like state funds or federal funds, there are caveats that go with those, and just putting up housing without those supports won't happen with those funds. And it's restrictive, but importantly so sometimes.
The main resources that are lacking are staff. When it comes down to staffing, a lot of these emergency shelters require, either overextended shifts beyond what the staff would typically work for the provider, or overnight shifts, weekend shifts. And so a lot of the providers feel uncomfortable saying, yes, we can run something like that, because they want to do it right. They don't want to stand something up and have it be a similar living situation to what's going on in the hotels. And so, even if they could, they don't feel like they could even do it part of the way right with the staff that they currently have.
You can go where you wish.
Sure.
If you want.
So thank you for having this forum. It's excellent, great for the city, all of us here. I'm glad the homeless are here, or the audience. Is this working?
It is. It's going.
Oh, okay.
So for the microphone, it won't make you
can't.
louder, but it's so that the cameras can hear what you're saying when they play it back.
Okay, great. So, a lot of ideas. So I keep hearing the word resources, which means money. So this is, we have an opportunity here as a city and the state of Vermont, which has led many movements go across the country. So each state has to deal with homelessness and is its own template. So this crisis, as they say, is an opportunity as well. And because it is nationwide, and it does involve mental illness, substance abuse, depression. I've had it in my family, so I understand this, as well as a lack of affordable housing. So the thing is, I know I took care of my mother and I used the fusion to keep her out of her nursing home, a fusion of the great social services offered by the state of Vermont, and then also free market entrepreneurship. The synthesis of it seems to work the best, where otherwise you have a hotel where someone's spending $80, $100 a night instead of housing, where my mother could be at the Pines for $200 a day, or just pay a simple monthly rent, affordable from her Social Security check. So you have to, it does come down to money. So this is a big issue. You have to think big. And the city, it's so exciting because there are, it's kind of like going through another, blossoming in a sense. There's a lot of projects going on, and it could draw more homeless people to the area. But it seems to me that because Rutland has a history of manufacturing, and Vermont's been sometimes anti-business, but the city of Rutland could have a brewery, maybe not as grand as the Alchemist, but a brewery, and the proceeds go to the homeless. And you have to start a social movement where, helping the veterans, and you have a label, a medallion on a beer can, or it could be ice cream or anything that says, support the homeless. And then a certain amount of the proceeds go towards long-term recovery center, housing. And then you go to Killington and you get the Women's World Cup athletes, international, and you get them to put their little logo of, you know, the woman skiing downhill on the beer can saying, we support the homeless too. And you start a social movement because, you know, it's just part of humanity. And it's how, as a community, the forum's so great because how, as a community, how do we want to approach it? So it's how you approach it. And each state, each community has to deal with that. So, yeah, I mean, I've noticed that, you know, there wasn't a lot of homeless. And then, you know, there's a bit of an increase. But we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. But the homeless people need support and their families need support. And I just know I took care of my mother and actually my brother who had substance abuse, probably would have been homeless without me, and it does get tricky. So the eviction was a good issue because I hear from other people, you know, you want to rent, but you're scared because if something goes wrong, you can't get the person out of your home. And you've worked so hard, and now it's just torture, and you can't get them out. The police can't really do any. I mean, I've had the problem. I've talked to other people, so that is a big thing too. As people are transitioning into permanent housing, where homeowners feel like they have property rights, and that's the thing. There's a war on property rights in this country as well. So you have all these things coming to a head, and there's just. I think, you know, part of the city, open up one of the buildings. I mean, start a big brewery, start a movement where we support the homeless. But instead of we support the homeless, just support the homeless. I actually made a beer can. I should have brought it, and then you have the World Cup, you know, because people want to morally, because it's nationwide and affects everyone in our country. People want to do something about it. And we want to have that humanitarian instinct, but, you know, it's in that way they can at least see a product and feel like, you know, people do it for climate change and this and that. What about our people, our countrymen and women? Like, we, to support people who just need that extra. So like you're doing here and all that, but bring in entrepreneurship and, you know, a fusion of government and free market. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is a great idea. Can I respond to that really quick? Sure. The problem is there's only 650,000 people in the state, and most of the people that come here with money don't really contribute to the state other than
Property taxes.
tourism, property taxes, and there's not enough people that come into the state, and there's not enough encouragement for people to come here to function at a higher level to support the overall growth, to support things like that, if that makes sense.
And I think that's true, but we've found in the past that it's possible to marshal enough resources locally. Do I think it'll tackle 700 individuals who all of them need some level of some level of clinical help? But I think a partnership, as you described, within the community is the only way, is going to be the only way out for our community, is for all of us to pull together in the same direction. But nobody knows what that looks like yet. And the bare bones, that's a great example of how to do.
And I just want to follow up one more thing. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But I do want to emphasize.
Exactly, kept their ice cream up.
But that's a super long.
A Rutland ice cream brand. I mean,
And I do want to emphasize, it's somewhat money related, but we're talking other resources that are really, really lacking too. So it may surprise you to learn that some providers in Rutland actually have the funding to be able to hire 4 or 5 more people, and they cannot hire anyone. One of the other policies that, we want to investigate, we've been kind of focused on trying to find a provider to be the backbone for that transitional housing facility, but we do want to look at some of the policies and see how they're impacting this issue, because Vermont doesn't currently have reciprocity for their clinical licenses, the licenses that they give out. So that means that if someone comes and they have a licensed clinical social worker license from another state, it's not recognized in the state of Vermont. So they have to do some other things to get licensed in the state of Vermont. And so that becomes, an issue that makes it hard for the social service providers to hire. And then if they can get someone in here from out of state, they usually run into the issue of not being able to find housing. And so it becomes kind of this vicious circle, but...
Which burns out social service workers.
Yes, yes, they're very burned out.
Also mental health providers. It's just...
Yes. Okay, sorry.
You're up.
Sorry.
Sorry, thank you for waiting.
That's about what I was going to say now.
That happens to me all the time.
I just had a comment. I'm kind of in shock. Back in 2000, and I think it was 2018, 2019, I was involved in starting the Housing First program in Rutland, partially a partner in that. And in the first year, we have 64% of the chronically homeless population in 1 year. And I'm shocked to hear how the problem has gotten exponentially worse. It's shocking to me. The other thing that's shocking to me is that Vermont is a poor state. We have the second highest per capita homeless rate in the country behind California. And that was shocking to find that out. And there's so much hidden poverty. I think that may be why it's so shocking. We know that there's homeless population here, but to lead the state in that the country in that area, California because you see it in the news all the time, and the encampments and.
It's warm weather there, so why?
So the thing that I'm most shocked about is to hear the numbers that you're talking about and wondering where the trend line is going. I mean, if we're here now and it's increasing, where is it going to be in 5 years? I mean, it boggles your mind to think what's going to happen. And 180 kids? I got to tell you, as a former mental health worker, trauma is behind the substance abuse problem we have. And we are building a bigger problem right now with all those kids homeless.
A lot of people don't realize when you're homeless, that is traumatic in and of itself. Even if you're, sorry. I'm speaking, I was homeless for a short while a number of years ago, and I was very fortunate that I was able to be sheltered during that time and get back on my feet and get an apartment. When you are chronically homeless, whether you have kids or not, it is very traumatic and stressful, even if you're told, okay, you have here for 6 months, because in your brain, it's always going, okay, now I have 5 months and 20 days. Now I have 5 months, 19 days. Now I've got 4 months, 12 days. It's your body, your brain doesn't get a rest. So it doesn't matter how old you are being traumatized every single day.
Just one other point. This summer I heard whoever the person is in the legislature in charge of housing talk. And one of the things that we are understanding is how complex the housing issue is. That it has to do with wages, it has to do with housing, it has to do with the expense of lumber, it has to do with resources. I mean, if you were to look at all the things that contribute to this, it's widespread, and one thing is not going to solve it. The thing that was shocking was the number of people who qualified for mortgage, whatever the state or the federal mortgage. When the points went up, the number of people who qualified plummeted for housing in terms of being able to qualify. So you had working people who in 1 year qualified for housing, and it was cut at least 50% in terms of who qualified. So all those people were wiped out in terms of that. And as you were talking about earlier, you have a blockage. If you can't get any movement here, then it affects everything below it. So it's cyclical. So I guess my last point is everything is working perfectly as designed. The outcomes that we're getting, I'm serious. It is working perfectly. If we want a different outcome, we can't use the same design because that's the outcome that we're going to get.
Get the rust off the rust belt. Get the rust off the rust belt.
And my fear is we're all hoping and waiting for more money to come. And I got a feeling it might come a little bit, but it's not going to come commensurate to the problem that we have. And if we think that we're going to continue to try to solve the homeless problem by doing the same things that we've been doing all along that haven't worked, what are we doing? We have to get out of the box. We can't think in that way. We can't wait for money. You know, the work that you people are doing, I just am so happy that you're here and that you're doing the work, and I know how hard it is, and I praise you. But if we wait for a strategic plan in 2 years, how many people are going to die in the meantime? How many children are going to be suffering and failing in school and people...
And new children being born.
We can't wait for that, and we can't wait for money, and we have to do something with what we have, and the best thing that we have is all of us. The resource that we have in this city and in this state is the people of Vermont. And we don't have a lot, but we have ourselves. And if we could find a way to build housing that doesn't require expensive materials, if we could build housing that would include volunteers, in which it didn't require a lot of skill, but that it could be done by multiple people. Habitat for Humanity is a tremendous program, and we got to continue to do that. Okay. But the number of houses that we need, it's never going to keep up. So anyway.
What I'm trying to do is just allow the gentleman to speak, and then in a very process-driven way, get the input from the rest of the audience. Because we don't want to have a cross going back and forth.
What I do just want to say on what you just mentioned is, we completely agree. Like, you can't just keep doing the same things and expecting different results. And that's, I realize, and I'm frustrated as well, that there needs to be things that are being done right now. And I think, at the city, they're doing lots of good things right now. They're working on plans. They're making sure that when the unhoused population is still in the hotel, that those places are clean, livable, good places to be, good places to have children raised in. But what I would caution against is, if we continue to go and say short term, we're going to do an intervention here, short term, we're going to do an intervention here, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of different mess at the end of that. And so the strategic plan is going to be great, even though it's going to be down the road. It's going to be nice to take a bird's eye view from everything and come up with a plan that's going to work more effectively, more efficiently than reactive intervention plans along the way. And so there's got to be stuff that's happening now, but I think, the strategic plan too, it's a step in the right direction for making sure that any interventions that we do from 2026 on are going to be working towards something different than what's happening now.
I do want to take 2 points that you were talking about. Gordon, don't quote me on this number. You can call Angus and find out tomorrow. But I believe when I met with Angus, who's in charge of the Homeless Prevention Center, he said that early on in the voucher program, they took, I think it was 1,200 people that had entered into the hotels and found them homes or housing in some sort. That was in the first 2 or 3 years. So everything that we're seeing now is, there's already been 1,200 placements. That's a lot. Rutland is very, very lucky when it comes to federal housing in 2 ways. One, we have a couple of HUD-based locations throughout the city that have been built over the years. And 2, we have a lot of vouchers that can be used for people who can't afford rent, so like a Section 8 level type of program. One of the challenges with that was we had 75, when I became mayor, we had 75 unused vouchers because we couldn't find places for people. Not, the vouchers existed, but we couldn't find places. And what the Rutland Housing Authority has done is they've actually gone back to the HUD and said, hey, we want to repurpose some of these vouchers to keep people from becoming homeless. So while all of this looks like a relatively large challenge that we're dealing with, we've also been able to keep people housed. So there is some movement here, but I love the ideas of big picture thinking about kind of breaking the boundaries. Strategic plans need to happen. One of the biggest gaps that we saw in the past 4 years that I've been kind of thinking about this and is that the state keeps saying, hey, what's your suggestion? And then, well, what do you need? And then there's no resulting action plan, right? There's no resulting funds. Right now they're looking, Megan was just mentioning it, for temporary sheltering situations. Well, that is not what Rutland needs. That's not what people in the hotels need. They don't need a step down, we need a step up, right? And so that's why we focused on transitional housing, the services. So, there are some thought processes, but these big ideas, and continue to share the feedback, we like it. We're taking notes. And this is certainly things we can integrate. All right, other questions? All right, I'm gonna go back and work my way forward. So,
I'm, excuse me, Father Bernie Bourgeois, pastor of Christ the King Parish, and I deal with this every day. I've got people calling daily looking for anything that I can give them, and it's always difficult to know what to give and how to give it and how to make that work. I have people sleeping on the steps of the church every night. I'm dealing with that, and I just can't evict them. They're my brother and sister in Christ, and I don't feel I can do that. So I've been working with them. There's been a lot going on. That's why I'm here tonight. So I have a question, and it kind of goes along with some of these ideas that we've already heard. Before I say the question, I think we've all got to realize the state's not going to solve our problems. The state can't solve its own problems. It certainly isn't going to solve our problems. I wonder if some kind of a local task force of more than just government employees and agencies, some business leaders, clergy, I'd be happy to be part of that if you were going to do that. I'm sure some other folks in here could come together and start thinking about some of these ideas, and maybe there'll be other ideas that would also pop up. That would be my thought.
Thanks, Bob. Do you want to speak to that for a second, Megan, while I go to the next person?
That's exactly what we're working toward.
Yeah, we're working.
Identifying the right people to be on that team. So thank you. That's precisely what we're working towards.
And after we've kind of established a team, there'll be a larger call out and involve any community member that wants to come in and be a part of those meetings and that process and whatever solutions come out of that.
Hi, I'm Sarah Janolfi. I'm the rector of Trinity Episcopal Church here downtown. First of all, thank you, Brother Father Bernie, for your words. So every Tuesday morning, I and a group of Trinitarians go to Companions in Wholeness at the United Methodist Church, where we help feed those who are hungry, any that is completely low, no barrier. And I know when I'm in that space, I occupy two great positions, or three great positions of privilege. At my home, I have at least 20 outlets where I can plug in my phone to stay connected, do my work, and also have a little fun and entertainment. I have 2 showers that I can use to bathe myself and keep up basic hygienic needs. I have 3 toilets that I can use to make my homeostatic adjustments. I'm wondering if there is any plan, or for God loved the world, any concept that a plan could have value to help give dignity and help people meet their basic needs, because now that folks are out, they don't have that way, that lifeline of connection, and they can't have their basic dignity met. Will it cost money? Yes. Will bathrooms or showers need to be monitored and cleaned at an excessively high rate? Yes. Will that also cost money? Yes. Will it stop people from defecating on our property? Probably not entirely. And I still think it is a basic value that is worth more than a concept of a plan. Is this possible?
Thank you, Sarah. So Commander Prouty, who runs Project Vision inside of the city, has been going out on Mondays with a team of people to do healthcare and welfare checks for those that are camping throughout the city. He has, in partnership with the Housing Trust, been leveraging Lincoln Place to provide people a place to take a shower, use the bathroom, do their laundry. But that's very point in time. I was up in Montpelier with the Montpelier city manager, and his name is Bill. And Bill and I were talking about what they've been doing, and they've actually provided, they happen to have acquired an old golf course that's not in operation, so they've provided camping space, some bathrooms. They don't have the facilities to do showers, but they've been using porta potties and things like that. So something we can certainly consider. Now, we've had kind of an internal task force to talk about what we can do in the short term, because it's twofold, right? First piece is that dignity, and then second is, people need to use the bathroom, and we need to be able to provide that space in a safe way that also is accessible in the city. So,
and some of that is about locating those spaces. So if there is space in either of the churches that you guys could open up, we can certainly be a part of helping finding volunteers, getting the word out about that, and helping you find the manpower to run that. But some of it is, you have to have the available space and the person raising their hand first saying, we can open this for these hours.
Personnel volunteer help we could offer and be in consideration of something like that. So.
Thank you. Randall raised his hand.
I have. I just wanted to point out that while we don't have showers, we do have bathrooms. We do have seats for folks. We have made it possible for folks to use our computers, to borrow books, even if they don't have a permanent home, to plug in their devices. We have deliberately kept the outside plugs on so folks can sit outside with their devices plugged in. Unfortunately, somebody stole all the chairs off the lawn, so it's a little less comfortable.
Yeah, they're at the hotel.
What's that?
They're at the hotel.
They're at the hotel.
Which one?
Wait, Hotel North.
What's that?
They're outside?
Thank you for that.
That's where they are.
But we do.
I know I live there.
We do try to be part of the solution, so we're happy to put that word out, and thanks for the opportunity.
All right, so questions, I've got one here, one here. So I'll just...
Okay. So my final question for this evening, I think. Thinking to help the short term for the next few months, because I know the state has been providing tents for people so they can camp for the next few months. And speaking about doing the showering and stuff, there's also, you can get portable showers, and they're not great, and there's not great water pressure, but if those can be handed out, and if there's like an official encampment and stuff, those are available. I mean, campers use them all the time. So there is that, because there is being able to keep yourself clean and stuff is very important.
Where are people allowed to camp legally?
That's yours.
So,
Hey, I'm homeless, we all want to know this.
Yeah.
This is a loaded question here.
it is a load of questions, and I honestly, so the,
Go talk to the fairgrounds.
so,
The city does not control the fairgrounds.
Who owns the fairgrounds?
State fences on anything, I just want to know where I'm allowed to go, since you took me on one hotel, where am I supposed to?
so let me see if I can answer the question. So we do, the city does know about the encampments that exist, and they exist where there are private property owners that are willing to permit that camping on their property. There are state parks. You can camp in a state park for 14 days before you have to move, so that's an option as well. State parks right now don't have services, but meaning there aren't people like checking you in or checking you out, but they are open to the public. So written permission from private property owners is one option. Within the city limits, it's difficult because we have zoning regulations, so camping's not allowed in certain areas. But outside of the city, and I'm just presenting the facts as they sit, private property owners are probably the best way to go in getting permission from them. National Forest too. I think you need permits for the National Forest. I'm not entirely sure. I do know that the state, you can do 14 days and then you have, then you have to move. So, let me get a couple questions over here. Oh,
I
sorry.
don't have a comment, but I have a question. The person from Habitat. You said what Habitat needs is land?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that for all of us, please?
Do you want to just elaborate real quick?
I'll elaborate real quick. Thank you for asking that. So we build new construction primarily right now, and we also can do rehabs on existing properties. The biggest hurdle for Habitat is the cost of the property. As you know, it's very expensive to purchase property, especially within the city limits. So we are always looking for low cost or even donated land that we'd be able to build on. So if you have any and you know anyone, please feel free to reach out to us at Habitat.
Habitat would need to own the land?
Yes, we need to own it so we can develop it, and then our homeowners purchase it. It's affordable, safe, modest housing. They do obtain a mortgage for it, but it bridges a gap between what the conventional market will sell something for and what someone can actually afford to purchase if their average median income is between 30% and 80% of our county. So I could explain that. Feel free to reach out to me, Rebecca Stevens, Executive Director for Rutland Habitat, and you can reach me at rutlandhabitat@gmail.com.
Thank you.
Thank you. I never knew that about that.
Did I get you all right? I think, okay, you good? All right, I didn't get you.
This is just a short-term idea, but during the cold weather, the Elks Club, and then during Hurricane Irene, the Leahy Center at the hospital set up cots. And right now, this evening, when we go outside, it's going to be cool. So for people who have already been kicked out, maybe those places are a place to stay until something bigger comes along.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We will be looking for opportunities.
I just have a quick barrier question. In addition to money, which is always something we all would like more of, it sounds like the greater need is staff. And if there are people in other states who would like to come and work here, but there's a reciprocity problem, can we address the reciprocity problem? Are we being too exclusive?
I mean, hopefully, and that's something that, when I said we want to investigate it a little bit further about that policy and the implications of that, what I can tell you is that the number of licenses issued have been steadily decreasing since about COVID, honestly. So it's somewhat potential policies. It's also just a shift in people who were getting compassion fatigue during COVID. A lot of those social service providers were really overwhelmed in their positions in that time and left the field for other other positions, other lines of work. And so, I'm not sure that there's other people that want to come out. I do know that providers have told me that they've tried to hire someone from out of state and then they couldn't get licensed. They couldn't get the supervision hours that they needed to obtain the license because there wasn't a clinical social worker that they could, get those hours under. And then they couldn't find a house, so there's like several barriers to people coming from out of state that are beyond just that policy. But that's something that we'd have to look into because it would be more of a long-term thing of us pushing for policy changes then.
And we will do that, and I'm not going to chuck them under the bus, but there are a number of legislators here tonight, and I know there are legislators who are working diligently on the reciprocity issue because that's where that lays is with the state. But the strategic plan, as said, while it's 2026, hopefully there will be some action on reciprocity well before that, but the plan is not just for the city of Rutland. The plan is going to be handed to the state of Vermont. And so hopefully there will be no need to add reciprocity to a plan in 2026. But I'm confident that the legislators who are at least in this room recognize it as a real barrier, as you said.
Thank you. My name is Alex Adams. I'm on the Rutland City Board of Aldermen. 15 years ago, I was homeless. I was an active alcoholic and an active drug addict. I did not look to the government to pull me out of my situation. I looked around at the filth I was sitting in, hated it, and did everything I could so that I didn't have to live that way anymore. I got a minimum wage job. I rode the bus an hour to and from it every day for 4 or 5 years until I found something better for myself, until I'd saved up enough money just to move on to that next step, to go back to college. It's been 15 years. I'm a hell of a lot better now, and I think the world would be a lot better if people would start standing up for themselves and not expecting the government to do it for them.
That's a hard one to follow. My name is Stephen Box. I'm a houser.
Excuse me.
My name's Steve.
I know you can, Stephen.
My name's Stephen Box, and I'm a houser. Last year, I housed 15 adults and 19 children out of the motels, and 8 formerly homeless veterans. So, first things first, homelessness solution is homes. Everything else is not the solution. Homes. So I'm a housing first proponent. The second thing is I'm a zero obstacle houser. So I don't care about convictions, evictions, credit scores, employment history, references, housing history. There's no way I can house someone who's never rented before if I require rental history and references. And those that the public funds support require things like credit scores and references. In other words, I wouldn't qualify for housing if I were to go and ask the names that I shan't utter. But I deal with, as a houser, 25 agencies, from the VA to Council on Aging to 25 of them. And the one thing I see is that it is a system rife with redundancy and complexity to the point of absurdity. 3 things that ended with itty solution. Housing. I recently housed a woman with a child on the way and 2 children that were here. So I housed her. And then I was taken to task by the Department of Children and Families because I didn't do it right. Now, to me, it's easy. You open the door, you give them the keys, they're housed. But there's paperwork. 3 months later, so July, August, and here we are, today's the last day of September, the paperwork still isn't done. That's just one agency that you pay for, thank you very much. Same month, I housed another woman, different agency. And again, I did it wrong. Now, there's no training video for housers, so, and there's 25 different departments and agencies I work with, so that's a lot of video for me to watch in order to house somebody properly. But the Vermont State Housing Authority took me to task because you're supposed to do a HAP. Don't know what a HAP is. I'll go look it up in the acronym and abbreviation dictionary. But I was supposed to go through them first. So you see, it's 25 different languages I've got to speak to not house somebody. Because at the end of the day, that's another 3 months and I still haven't been paid. So I can house people all day long. It's easy. And I would suggest that if you got the housers together, you'd find a lot of vacant units. When we had a houser meeting not too long ago, one of the things we all agreed on is the agencies drop and run. Like they don't stay with the clients. So who do I call? So for the VA, for the veteran housing, I've got the VA, Supportive Services of Veterans Family, Pathways, Veterans Inc., Friends of Veterans, Veterans for Veterans, and I'm probably leaving somebody out, but at the end of the day, you get the idea. Now, they all show up for the ribbon cutting, but if there's a problem, none of them are responsible at all in any way, shape, or form. So you see, I can't solve the inevitable issues that come up in a community, whether it's housing or homelessness or whatever. There are going to be issues. So who do I turn to? Can't put people in the units, can't keep people in the units, can't figure out who's responsible and who my partners are. At the end of the day, it's easier to not be part of the solution. It's as if there was a meeting and everybody said, hey, how can we make this more complicated? And not solve the problem. So I would suggest, number one, where are the housers? Okay. We got some units. Someone that has housing, someone that provides housing, someone that creates housing, someone that manages housing. A houser is a landlord, a property manager, a developer, a renovator. So at the end of the day, I've got units coming online this week. The city was inspecting them. Speaking of inspections, I had 7 inspections in 1 week from different agencies, from public health, state, public health, county, public health, no, is it county? No, state. The city, yeah, so Mike will be there. He'll bring backup. But if you think about how many inspections, is it easier to go market? Yes, in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. But not a day goes by, I don't get a phone call from somebody that's on one of the competitive lists. Because look at how many departments in the city of Rutland have a housing navigator specialist, whatever, that cold call to find out, do you have any housing? Do you have any housing? What's that?
I've got 5 housing specialists.
Working for you.
Working for me. I've got a nurse specialist through the hospital because my severity of my medical problems. I was hospitalized for 5 days. 2 weeks ago, they evicted me from my room. The next day after I was out of the hospital, I was vomiting profusely, could not even barely stand up, and they evicted me out of my housing anyway. And a Vermont chronic care, and I've got News Story, and I've got everybody on my back, and nobody can find anything. And we're all just right where you are, where all of my social workers are trying to fight uphill battles. And I go to counseling center with a group counseling for 2.5 years with some of these people, and they are in tears at this counseling meeting. Right. My social service workers are in tears because they can't deal with the amount of all of what you're describing.
Sure. Cold calling is the worst way to find housing because you're calling around to find out. Do you have a 3? No, I have a 1. Oh. As opposed to, where's that registry of housing? Now, I created one for me and I provide it. And yet, why don't we have one for the housers? So 1, how do we connect the housers? 2, how do we get the registry? And I know the registry is a bad word, so I won't use it again. How do we create a roster of vacant units? The housers all know because we share. When I can't house somebody, I call the people that can. I know who they are. How is that a secret? And number 3, where's the landlord liaison? We have one. Is the landlord liaison here tonight? No. So public funds are paying for a landlord liaison. Again, more mystery science. Anyway, that was my short answer on what can we do for housing, homelessness, housing.
Thank you, Stephen.
I do. Wait, Mike, hold on.
Mike?
I do just want to say thank you for sharing that, because part of what we're doing is we're, going through, we're talking to providers, identifying resources, but we're also identifying barriers to accessing those resources. And I think what you just spoke about really hit the nail on the head about that, about how it's difficult jumping through all of these different hoops, filling out all of this paperwork, figuring out what you're supposed to do, understanding the acronyms. So thank you for sharing that. That's on our radar now, and I want to connect with you after this so that we can exchange information, because I would like to learn more about housing from your perspective. And I want to, you said that there were Hauser meetings, I'd like to attend those.
Hi, I'm Linda Allen. I work at the Companions in Wholeness. I work with Ellie McGarry, and we have between 100 and 140 people that come through Monday through Thursday for breakfast and lunch. We're right on the front hearing what's going on. I get calls from women who have children who have camped at the mall, but then they've been told to leave, and if they come back, they'll be arrested. I have disabled people seriously disabled people who have no place to go once they're kicked out. And that's very serious, because they're the ones I know they're going to die. I am so grateful for the conversation here, for everything that everybody said and everybody's ideas, but we need something right now, because 200, 300, 400 people out on the streets looking for a bathroom, no less, or great, you can get a shower, but how many showers a day can Project Vision handle? We need something now. You can't pitch a tent. Is there any way to legislate something that gives a space for people to put up tents? Could we have some porta potties? We need help now for these people. It's not something you can just put off till 26, and I know you're all trying to come up with ideas, but right this second, what can we do for the people that have tents in their hands, little children running behind them? What can we do? That's my question.
If it wasn't for that, most of us would already starve. Completely.
Yeah.
So I just want to go back to what Chris Loris's point earlier. The legislature each year, through the Office of Professional Regulation, does talk to other states, and what is called a compact with another state means that we will license people, nursing, electricians, plumbers, whatever it is. So Megan, if you can get to me the specific occupations that you'd like to see us develop a compact with, I'll see that we put a bill in next year.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? So the question was, can you use tractor trailers some way for housing?
I think from what we've heard from providers, from a provider perspective, when they're hesitant to use some of these creative solutions for housing, and the reason I hear from them that they want to do it right is that you can, if you're not careful with the way that you're housing individuals, you're not careful with the amount of oversight that's there, the accountability that's there at that site, you could potentially put them in a more dangerous situation. And so I think there's this, fine line that you have to walk in getting people housing and making sure that it's going to function in a way that's helpful to them and not just something that becomes another harm, another trauma for them.
What about those little houses that are solar energied, making like tiny houses?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of this actually all stemmed from about 2 years ago. We started looking at a transitional housing campus. So specifically to say, hey, you're leaving the hotels, there's no apartments to rent, what can we do between those two spaces? And we looked at tiny homes, 20 by 20. Within Rutland, you have to have a certain square footage. Again, legislatively, we would need to change that, but you have to have at least a 20-foot wall by a 20-foot on the outside. And so we designed something to do that. But the problem is the funding for that and being able to build it. So we went to the state with that, and that's what we're currently working on. However, the Makerspace is actually working on designing something a little bit smaller that can be moved and ported to different locations. And if that's something that you're interested in working on, I would reach out to them. They are putting together teams of people to work on and build these units. Where they can be sited, still to be determined. But it is something that is actively being worked on. And it kind of goes to your temporary, like what can we do right now? They're working on that right now. The other thing is, the state has looked at providing temporary shelter, or emergency shelter is a better way to say that, but there's so many challenges to getting those stood up, and the biggest one again comes back to they're not going to open one without a person there to run it, so we have to have that agency. So we are actively moving as quickly as possible. I wanted to come back to your question, but we are actively moving as quickly as possible to try to get an agency to run some sort of housing system right now. So I've got one over here, and then I'll come back.
I'm concerned about, you said there were over 100 children, 100 and so many children. How many of them are school age, and how can we keep them in school when they don't have an address and the school won't accept them? How can we make that? Transportation from their tent to school, people volunteering to transport these kids so that they have something constant for them 5 days a week, something stabilizing for them, all the school-aged children that have lost their homes.
I can tell you, there are requirements to transport children from wherever they are to the school. And, what's that? I'm sorry.
More red tape.
Yeah, but no, that's not red tape. There are requirements that kids must be transported from where they're living to school. And it's a very complex system that was explained to me once that I can't regurgitate. All I know is the transportation should be taken care of pursuant to state and federal law.
Some of the issues with that, though, we have spoken to, I can't remember her official title, but, she's the assistant superintendent for Rutland schools, and she oversees the school's homeless student population there. And so one of the challenges that they're finding with, transporting, what he's talking about is even if, so let's say you start in a Rutland school and then you move to an encampment that's closer to another school. The school then liaises with the school closest to wherever the child has moved and said, are they going to go to your school now? Are you going to pick them up? Do we need to come pick them up from our bus and bring them there? The challenge they're having is a lot of people exiting the hotels don't know necessarily where their next address is going to be. And so, I know that the schools are working hard on making sure that they can make accommodations for those students. But there's also a lot of protections about, we can't go in and get a list of who those students are because there's federal protections around keeping that information private.
So I want to see if there's more questions. I'd like to say if you haven't asked a question yet, I want to come to you next, and then we can come back to people who have. So are there any other questions in the audience? I have 1, 2 in the back. I'll get you first.
How you doing? My name's Scott. I am homeless. I did my 80 days in the hotel. I went out. I came in July 1st. I went out after 80 days 2 weeks ago. Do you people realize that the hotel rooms aren't being filled? And I've been told, call me 2 weeks before December 1st and you can have your room back. And 9 of us went out the day I went out, and I was at the hotel yesterday, and all 9 of them rooms are still empty because the state has a contract with these hotels and they can't fill the rooms. So why am I on the street and eating at the church when my room's empty and December 1st, all the rules are off and hey men, we're all back in hotels? Because that is what we hear every day at the church. Can somebody explain that to me?
I'm not gonna lie, I asked Chris the same question the other day. I'm like, why did the state decide to just say, hey, let's stop this for 2 months, and then everyone comes back on December 1st? And I, you know.
They're trying to kill us.
They are punishing the homeless for the people that tore up hotel rooms. That's what they're doing.
I'm sorry, I just need to know who the they are, and
The
each time
state
you
of
say
Vermont
they.
that kicked us out of these hotels.
It's because they reverse engineered the budget to figure out how much the state could afford for X number of rooms and XY number of nights.
Who are
And
paying for the rooms that are still open now?
the state for the individuals who haven't exceeded their 80 days.
Or hotel owners are making, you know, there's no other way to say it, deals with certain.
I was told by the hotel owner that I was staying with that she wanted me to stay there. She was willing to make a deal, but that the state told me that she was not allowed to rent me rooms, even at the price that the state was paying for the rooms, that I was not allowed to pay out of pocket to stay in my room for even an extra day.
Exactly.
She told me I was not allowed to keep my belongings there overnight, and that they would throw everything out by morning, and they threw all of my neighbors' belongings, all of her children's belongings, and all of my other neighbors' belongings, and all of his children's belongings out in the dumpster in 4 hours period of time. And they told me that the state was telling them that they were not allowed to even have me pay them for an extra night out of pocket. They said the state was not going to allow them to do that. So I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's what I was told by the hotel owner. I do respect the hotel owner at the place I've been staying. They've been doing an excellent job. They've been wonderful to me the whole time I've been there.
So if you're free to share the name of that hotel owner with us, and he shares with us the name of the state employee that said that, we will work it backwards. And I would hope that if you're willing to share the name of the hotel owner, and that hotel owner will tell us the name of the state employee, we will walk that back.
I was at the roadway north and told exactly the same thing. Basically, exactly the same thing.
We do know that there have been.
Throughout everything.
$77 a night is what I was told, what the state pays. And for when you pay your extra paydays, they wouldn't even, because before they started this 80 days on July 1st, they rolled the days from the end of the month to the beginning of the month. So I know people that have been thrown out today with children. A girl with one leg that has one leg because the Quality Inn had a blood stain on the carpet, and she lost her leg because of being in the hotel program. Thursday, she's out on the street. And she was told, nope, even if you have your paydays, even if you get paid on the 1st or the 3rd, which they all do, they won't even let you rent the rooms.
That's what I was told as well. You can't even pay what the state's been paying to keep your room overnight, to keep your belongings safe, to get them out in the morning. You can't even come back with 2 rounds of people to pick them up.
Thank you for sharing that.
They hold them for 8 hours so that you can get 2 rounds of people to come pick them up and take them to a store.
Thank you for sharing that. That's something we can look into. I have heard opposite stories though too, of where some hotels, and I don't know if it's hotel to hotel, are allowing people to pay and pay at a lower rate even in some cases than what the state was paying. And so we can talk after the meeting, and maybe you could share that information about the hotel with us then.
Come up after, we'll get your information.
I'm sorry to work up in front of everyone, but this is very, this is my heart right now, and this is my family, and we've been thrown out on the streets. And the people that were in that hotel were my family. I've lived there for 2 years, and those little kids were my kids, and my neighbors were my family. And that's why I'm so upset right now, and I'm really sorry to do this.
Hi, I have a question. It's probably a very naive question for the people in the social service sector and our civil servants. And then I have a comment for the audience. So first, for our moderators and people who are in the social service sector, is there any data connected to the voucher program about employability or unemployability among voucher recipients? That's my question for you all that might know. And just to the audience in general, I'd like to make a comment. I've worked closely with Latino immigrants, and I've worked closely with middle-class college students. And both of those groups are very clever in improvising housing arrangements that probably the landlords don't even know about, because the college students can't afford the rent by themselves, or the Latino immigrants can't afford to live in an apartment based on the pay that they're getting from, let's say, the meat processing plant. I wonder if that could serve as a possible model. That's all.
To your question about data on employability, that is something that's part of the reason why we're trying to gain access to more specific data that's Rutland specific, that's entered in the coordinated entry system. There are some questions that ask about those specific needs. If you need vocational training, if you need educational resources or training, in addition to the other needs that they may report on those forms, like mental health and substance use disorder needs. There is data on it. I don't know what it is right now, but we are trying to, get a better idea of what those needs are, so that if there are needs beyond mental health, beyond substance use disorder, that we can get a better idea of exactly how much need there is for things like education and vocational training.
Other questions, comments? So, okay, great.
Quick, opposite. So we're second in the nation. Why is there no federal funding? I know there's federal funding, but why is there no federal funding?
Because the Democrats are giving all the money away.
Well, one of our Democrats actually heads up the health and whatever committee, federal, Sanders. I'm just curious why there's no emergency federal funding for this particular situation right now.
I'm not sure that there's not any federal money. Like I said, whenever we're talking to providers, they have funding to do things. It's other resources that are lacking, whether it's housing, whether it's staffing. So there's just multiple barriers, I think, to addressing this issue.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the biggest calls for help from the providers are additional people. I think Megan said it earlier. I know there's one provider in town that has 4 open slots, the funding ready to go from the state, and cannot fill those slots, right? That is one of the biggest challenges, is getting people here that are not already employed somewhere else, doing this job somewhere else, trying to serve their community, getting them here to do that, or, even finding new people, which is, so Castleton, for example, is starting a master's in social work, or they're thinking of starting a master's in social work program. That's putting us 4 to 8 years out. That's a big deal and delay. So the challenge exists, the reactions are slow, and the lack of resources is one of the biggest challenges. And we can keep trying to throw money at it, but it's not going to fix that problem.
And what I do want to say quickly, is that we are working on seeing how viable it is to start creating a community group that can start discussing some of these issues with the providers, and keep your eyes and ears open for more information on that, because if that is something that we can get off the ground, that would be a great opportunity for volunteers in the community who are interested in providing help. Even you don't need a license to help a lot of these organizations in some ways. You can just be a citizen who wants to help, and hopefully as we go through this process a little bit more, we can start making some of those connections with the providers and the community.
Is it okay if that kind of brings me to my question, or my comment is, if finding a licensed clinical social worker, and I understand the value of having that background and that training as someone who works in a allied health field, but if that's going to be, a insurmountable barrier for the time being, then maybe tapping into other people who have other transferable skills like nurse case management, or or maybe even the hospital would but would be willing to help with some of their clinicians and get, again, like the community resources instead of like one service provider that, you know, or entity, because I think as many people, I think, through speaking through this have shown, it's the for lack of a better word, bureaucratic process that I think is getting in the way of providing immediate solutions to what we're seeing.
Oh, she summed it up for you? Okay, great. Here you go.
So I'm just concerned about the next generation. Are we doing everything possible to engage the next generation in their future community? I don't know how we can do it, but I just want to empower youth, right? Young adults.
Thank you for that. So that was a great comment on the next generation. You know, like we've been kind of saying, the focus for us is to kind of protect that youth contingent as this transition happens, but there's also, you know, students in high school, students at Stafford that work on things like this. And Chris and Megan have had a tight relationship with the school, so maybe that's something we can explore, is maybe some volunteerism there out of the high school, so I'd like, or the provided schools.
Yeah, or even internships through Castleton, because I know in the tech world it's hard for, I have 2 children who just graduated from college, and it's hard to get internships, never mind a job, just getting an internship. And so internships play very importantly when one goes to apply for a job or a career. So this is a great area maybe for, you know, Castleton have internships or whoever, because it's a huge industry in social services.
We have a Boy Scout in the back of the room. Maybe we can rally. There's a chair there. Other questions or comments? Okay, I got one here and then one there.
Okay, I'll just go ahead. I just came from Maine a couple months ago, and I became homeless from rehab after my medication with my anger issues and stuff like that. Right now, I'm helping my friend actually from being too homeless to a place that I have with a friend that has a problem with diabetic, 400 pound, who his landlord is sick. Find out today she has cancer. And my last time spent time with this kid. And I'm going to rehab this weekend, Thursday, Friday, to get myself clean. Being homeless, it's not fun. Being drug addict is very hard as homeless. We don't choose, I didn't choose to become homeless or a drug addict. My past, I'm living with somebody who we call the predator. And sometimes we're hard to talk about it. I try to go to AA meeting, 20 point, but today I'm hiding myself back home where I can help somebody, because I'm seeing somebody that's dying in front of me. And then at the end, I become homeless. From rehab, I'm going there in 2 weeks, come back in 2 weeks. I don't have a home to come. I'm working with News Story and people like Brock and stuff. I got kicked out from this hotel from 138 North Main Street. Somebody set me up. I gave somebody a jacket and stole a bike. They thought it was me. I didn't ride a bike for 25 years. So I walked from that hotel. And I'm afraid to get a hotel because it goes to my record. Like, people can set other people up. When you're too nice to people, you get back with something bad. But right now, today, I'm taking care of myself. This should be another homeless shelter. This homeless shelter actually is small. There should be another emergency shelter. When I was living in Maine, they created another shelter where people can stay for lunch and dinner. Instead of go out and doing drugs, stay inside, be strict with all of us. We need to be strict with each other, not just doing drugs, but go to AA meeting, go to something to do. That's what I'm doing today. I don't care if somebody's judging me, but I'm judging myself because I want to get better. Being as a homeless person today made me recognize to stand up for myself, go back to college, and stop doing drugs, because that makes me become a better person. I never chose to be homeless, never. And I never chose to become a drug addict. Sometimes we choose because we hide. We're afraid to tell the truth to each other. And that's why we need something emergency, like she said. Because that church that we're going today is the best church. We can talk like with them like a therapist, like a doctor. They can help us. Why this homeless shelter, like, is so small? Make a better shelter, with, like something quick for all of us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Haven in White River. It's called the Haven.
Yes.
That's where I stay.
You could probably learn something from them. They've set up their own homeless shelter. They've got stores where they sell stuff out of, and it's really self-sufficient. It really is, and it's if you went up there and checked it out, it's really awesome. It helps a lot of people.
If you're staying with them, if you're one of their people staying with them, they have chore lists basically to keep the place ticking over.
Yeah.
And stuff, and it changes from room to room, and it's great, and the people are great. They've still got the food pantry.
I was a training coordinator at a company in New Hampshire, and I lived in White River, and I did some training at the Haven, active training and stuff like that. And it really is a great place. It's a good example of how to set something up. They've got 2 stores that they really do good retail in.
Yeah.
It's all donations.
Thank you.
So we've got about 3 minutes left before we have to vacate the space. I do have a question in the back, and I'm going to, and then we'll do a quick close and kind of wrap things up. Megan, it's hrc@rutlandcity.org, right? So if you want to continue the conversation with us, just email us at hrc@rutlandcity.org.
So we really need sober housing. People getting off drugs need sober housing. I worked at Serenity House. We need it.
So we have some opportunities like that around Rutland City, and there's the mission, if you're coming out of the Department of Corrections, you have Dismiss House, but there's limited and everybody's full, right? It's definitely a challenge. So it's one of those things that as we're looking at housing solutions, that's a big one as well. First of all, thank you for sharing tonight. Thank you for coming together as a community to give us your feedback. A lot of great comments, questions. We are going to try to follow up. We're going to post this stuff on the city, the answers to your questions that didn't get answered tonight on the city website. So we'll have a page for homeless resource coordination on there. So check that out. The email address is hrc@rutlandcity.org if you want to continue the conversation with Chris and Megan. I think the process, this is an ongoing process. We'll try to keep you as up to date as possible. What I heard tonight, though, that I think we might need to put a little more focus on too is what is the short-term, urgent, decent thing to do from a compassionate standpoint in the city, and we need to make sure that that's on our list too. We're trying to look into that long-term future so that this is definitely something sustainable, but in the meantime, we've got some challenges that we need to address quickly, so we'll be working on that as well.
All that I would add is that, the email address, hrc@rutlandcity.org. If you're a private property owner willing to open up your property for encampments or for any other resources, if you want to get in touch with me and tell me how you're available to contribute, that's certainly information that Chris and I can pass along to providers who can help make those connections between those who need those services or those resources and between you all.
Yeah, and I've got nothing to close with except to reiterate what you said, gentlemen, that if there are state employees telling hotel owners that they cannot allow people to pay out of pocket to stay in a room, we need to know the name of that state employee so we can run it up the chain.
So thank you very much. I think the last thing I'll say is thank you to PEG TV. Thank you to the library for hosting. Thank you for our senators and representatives for being here, and thank you for coming. Have a good night. And our aldermen.